Brooks is sponsored by the Prudent Money Foundation on 91.3.
Well, how is the consumer when it comes to savings accounts and banks? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, the relationship between banks and their customers tells us a lot about what is going on with the consumer and how it goes with the consumer, it goes with the economy. Jennifer White of J.D. Power is here to talk about what they are seeing. Hey, Jennifer, welcome to Prudent Money.
Thank you for having me back on the program again. Happy to be here.
Now, what are you seeing with banks and customer movement of money from savings accounts? It seems like, for a long time now, it feels like a long time, you've been getting higher rates of return outside of the banking community with brokerage houses and that type of thing. And it just kind of now starting to catch on to seeing money move. What are you seeing? How are banks reacting?
Well, I'm not sure that banks are really doing a whole lot different today than they may have been doing 6 months ago. What we see a difference in is in the consumer reaction to their awareness of options available to them and whether or not they've decided it's worth going to chase those higher interest rates at other investment and or banking options.
Well, the survey question specifically asks, have you moved away from your primary bank to any other bank for any reasons? Are you seeing a lot of parallel moves between banks versus, your brokerage companies, which have the higher paying savings accounts? I guess I'm surprised there's a lot of bank to bank movement versus bank to brokerage account type services.
What we're seeing is that with most recent moves, we're seeing shifts both to bank and bank to brokerage firm, but the proportions are fairly low. They're lower than a third of the total responses making these money moves. Now, customers under the age of 40 are more likely to make the shifts than those that are older, but for the most part, what we're seeing is that when customers are making moves, they're doing it to chase higher interest rates, or they're doing it because they know that there is some other feature or functionality from that, landing account that they're attracted to. Maybe it's a digital tool that helps them manage their financial lives, but they're chasing for both of those reasons. When they aren't making moves, it's predominantly because they either view themselves as not having enough money to make it worthwhile, or just being resistant to the hassle of shifting money when the reward isn't necessarily all that large for the majority of customers.
As you do these surveys, and I think I read that y'all do them month to month, it's got to fascinate you why consumers do what they do when it comes to banks. Because you would think that, hey, I've got $20,000 sitting in a savings account at the bank earning 0.5% when I could be getting 5% at a Fidelity or a Vanguard. You think that they would be moving in bulk, but that's just not the case.
It most definitely is not the case. What we see is that when it comes to allowing your savings to grow and help make you more money, customers in general are fairly apathetic. They just are not taking the actions that are necessary in order to, really take whatever savings they have, whether it's $100, $1,000, or $10,000, and have it grow more money for them. What's interesting with that apathy is that there's another extreme as well. There is a small portion of the population that will chase every penny. They're also the population that likely chases rewards earnings on credit cards as well. They're just actively engaged and have no problem with the speed at which, they can open a new account and make a transfer happen. And they're out chasing cashback offers. They're chasing higher interest rates. They're chasing rewards and functionality. And it's really two extremes, apathy or hyperactive.
Well, in the survey, it points out, I think I saw 39% of those who have moved money feel overextended. Now, how do you define overextended in the survey?
Most definitely. So we do have a financial health segmentation. We ask consumers like those listening to the show to answer a series of questions around whether they can pay their bills on time. Do they have short-term and long-term savings? Do they have a plan, a financial plan for the future? Are they adequately insured? And as they respond to those, we create 4 different financial health segments. Picture it on a scale, healthy at one end, vulnerable at the other. Overextended sits just to the right of healthy. And overextended are customers who are struggling to pay their bills month to month, but they probably have a 401k or some long-range financial plan that they're just trying not to borrow against as they struggle month to month. They likely are more, insured, but they're customers that maybe have higher incomes but are still just trying to make ends meet on a monthly basis.
I talk about that category quite a bit, and I always talk about it that it's the category of people, the consumers, that inflation is pushing them right to the edge. They're barely hanging on. Is that
precisely
somewhat accurate? So it would seem to me it would be bigger than 39%. Were you surprised that it's that low?
I'm not really surprised at that. What is interesting about the overextended population is that they tend to be, because they are actively trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills, maybe even from one week to another. They tend to be the population that uses bank mobile apps or online banking more often. They tend to be the ones that are researching where they might be able to get that cashback offer or where they might be able to get some more rewards that could help them manage their entire, financial life. And so they tend to be, the ones who are really active. So, could that population be moving even more money than the 39% that are? Possibly. But, at some point, it also becomes about making sure that you are, having other strategies to help you manage your money rather than chasing rate and or rewards.
Jennifer, I'm always fascinated with the amount of money that people keep in savings. Now, your survey shows that, I think I got this right, 53% of respondents have less than $4,000. As you do these surveys frequently, are you seeing this get better or are you seeing it get worse?
So the report that you have is just a single month in time, but I happen to have this same question in a study that collects data monthly for a longitudinal for a very long period of time, and it's actually getting worse. At I believe it was the beginning of 2019, it might be the middle, that proportion that had less than 4,000 was at 40%, and now we're up to 53. So what we see is that is an erosion of short-term savings with the primary bank. Now, if of course, that's the primary bank is an important caveat. They may have moved some money into maybe one of those high-yield or brokerage accounts that we've been talking about today, or inflation is eating away at it. It's probably a mixture of both, and given that the majority of customers are less healthy financially, I suspect it's inflation eroding those deposits a little bit more than shifts to other high-yield options.
So, what's interesting is that if you, out of that list that characterizes the consumer that you talked about, the healthy category is only about 20%, and the other 80% is really not real overly positive categories. It seems like they're describing stress in some other way. Is that pretty accurate?
It's quite sobering. The ratio is actually closer to 30 to 70. We're about a third
30 to 70, okay. Today.
But still, that's sobering numbers. That 7 in 10 consumers are struggling financially in some way. It's definitely, and it's not getting better. Now, the good news is There's two pieces of good news in that before I scare everybody who's listening to the program today. The one piece of good news is that prior to 2024, even in 2023, we would see a lot of volatility in this makeup of the group, meaning, people were just, having one bad experience and then all of a sudden finding themselves vulnerable for the next few months because they had to, say, repair their car, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeing a level of stability in the last 12 months where we aren't seeing the status of the customer's financial health really making these wide swings. Now, it might not be the status that everybody wants, but predictability is better than instability. So that's one piece of good news. The second piece of good news is that while, this challenging financial health status stresses customers out, they're stressed about inflation, they're extremely worried that in the next 3 months, prices will go back up again. But we asked a question around how empowered customers feel to navigate the current financial circumstances, and that line's staying flat. It's not declining.
So what
average consumers telling us, I'll be okay.
So tell me this, as a bank, what do you do with this data? I mean, what's your conclusion? How do you make sure that you're, 6 months down the road and you haven't had a lot of this of the balances of savings accounts leave the bank? And what kind of steps do you take?
J.D. Power believes strongly that if banks are not using financial health status as a way to understand and really segment their population and using it to help market and talk to their customers, they're missing out. It is impossible, given the way customers are struggling with all of these topics, that if banks are just sending out generic messages, it's going to miss the target audiences. You need to customize and understand and meet your customers where they are. So that's the first thing banks should do. The second thing is that J.D. Power would never recommend that a bank change their business plan to offer a high yield account or, wipe out fees. We wouldn't be so bold. But what banks need to recognize is that customers need help navigating, avoiding fees, need help understanding when there might be an account that's a better fit for them. Maybe it's only a few percentage points more, but if someone at the bank reaches out and says, hey, we see that you've been successful at your savings goals, let's get that emergency savings into even a CD or something that earns marginally better interest rate, the trust and loyalty that comes from that customer to the bank because the bank had proactive outreach skyrockets. The banks need to be reaching out to their customers and demonstrating that they know who they are, they understand what they need, and they have solutions that can feel personal and not just some blanket sales opportunity.
It's interesting because I hear a lot of stories, and it seems like that a couple conclusions that I just out of observation is that from top to bottom, as far as your employees go at banks, they don't know what to do. They don't realize that this isn't like you say, that they don't realize that this is not just about higher interest rates. It's about relationship and the many things that bank could offer that they can't get by going to a Fidelity or someplace like that. And it's like you say, I think that goes a long way. But my concern with especially your medium and regional sized banks who've got other issues with commercial real estate and residential real estate is that there's a degree of apathy, it seems like, there.
Apathy from the bank?
Yeah, as far as, this will clear itself up, or this, there would, the worst case scenario would never happen. We can kind of just do what we've always done.
I wish I could comment on that because it's an important piece of the puzzle, but unfortunately, J.D. Power's data is really about the voice of the customer and
Gotcha.
Not necessarily about what the banks are doing. But what I will say is this. Banks, if they don't know where to begin or they are struggling perhaps with some apathy, perhaps the best place to start is by assessing your own employee base's financial health status and figuring out how you can help your employees. Because once you start doing that, they're going to be better equipped to help the customer. And in the end, everybody benefits from that scenario.
Jennifer, always great information, and I appreciate you coming on the program. Look forward to having you on again.
Fantastic. Thanks, and hopefully we can speak again soon.
Absolutely. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. I always find, J.D. Power is a powerhouse company, and the surveys and work that they do is way above your average survey or average opinion poll or whatever. I mean, they really dig in deep to find out what's going on. And it is really interesting how consumers are relating to banks. And it seems to me that there is a lot of apathy in the banking system, and that they don't realize this is 100% about relationship. And I'm even in fact, I'm convinced that most people don't know the wide disparity between interest rates at banks and interest rates at your Fidelities, your Vanguard, and so forth and so on. So and then the fact that people have CDs spread out all over so many different banks, it's one of those things where you don't really know what kind of shape that you're in. And it could be that you're creating a bunch of stress because based on information that's not real. I mean, you got way more savings account money than you thought that you did. Just not knowing is part of the problem. So I think that there's you can put a big question mark on the consumer today, and I think that we'll really see a lot more as to what kind of shape the consumer really is in as we go through the back half of this year. I think that it's going to be very telling. Plus, like it or not, the election cycle and process really kicks into gear. If you think about it, it's already June, almost midway through June, hard to believe, and in November, the election is going to be taking place. And and I've said this before, it doesn't seem like an election cycle. It doesn't seem like that we have any type of process going on at all. We just have a lot of back and forth arguing and name calling and whatever else happens during these times of the year, during these times of the cycle anyway. But we'll be very interested to see how the consumer holds things up, and the health of the consumer. That's one of the reasons I like to have Jennifer come on board. She's a vice president there at J.D. Power, and because I said this in the opening remark about as it's going to the program, is that as it goes with the consumer, it goes with the economy. Don't forget that 2/3 of economic growth rely on consumer spending, and that's a big percentage. And as you dig a little bit deeper, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I am very concerned about the ultimate resolution of $1.2 trillion in credit card debt with an average interest rate of anywhere from 24 to 27%, 30% in some cases. We're seeing 35 in some cases. That is not sustainable, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans itself out. One thing I wanted to mention is, and I want to encourage you to make sure that you are at the right bank, that you are very familiar with what your bank brings to the table, that you have somewhat of a relationship of some form with the bank. That's why I like the medium to smaller sized banks, because you have the ability to more so. I mean, you have the branch offices of the big banks and that kind of thing, and you have an opportunity there for relationship. But you definitely want to form that relationship and be confident that you're getting the services and support that you need from your bank. As I say that, I was talking about this on Friday when Tony Joe was not on with me on Friday about Wells Fargo, and I had to rush through this, but I just, this is beyond opinion. I think that we would all agree that there is just an issue there in that bank. I mean, the headline of one of the financial planning sites that follows all this was Wells Fargo accused of aiding elderly investor Ponzi scheme. Folks, you can't dress that headline up. Elderly investor Ponzi scheme. The accusation that they aided this to go on. Now, this was, if you go back, and I didn't keep a log. I should have kept a log. If I would go back and research, I'm sure I could create one. But they have a horrendous history of consumer abuse and fraud, creating accounts out of thin air. I mean, just on and on and on. And all they do is get fined, and they continue to do it. That's what amazes me. Because one of three things are going on here. Either they are innocent and have an extremely weak compliance unit that police the bank for these types of business. So they're missing the 500-pound elephant in the room. Or number two, they do not know what they're doing, and they know what they're doing, and choose to look the other way. Or they're just the kid that trouble finds, just bad luck. I feel like I'm being a little generous on that one. Wouldn't you know that millions and dollars are being funneled through your bank? Wouldn't you ask some questions? And for them to come up with, or whoever, and maybe it's just because it's Wells Fargo and it's easy target, but you would just think that company culture would be such that they would fight to keep these things from happening, to change the way that everybody looks at Wells Fargo. But anyway, I just bring that up. Hey, this is Bob Brooks. You got a question for me? Please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time. Keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.